Hi everyone. Today I am going to be reviewing a book which I discussed in at least one prior video, and I had written a blog post off of it. This video, of course, is based off of that blog post, as many of my videos are. I read this book in I think like 2017, 2018, and the blog post was published on the 24th of September 2018, called A Complicated Woman Who Deserves Better, and this is Mary, Mrs. A. Lincoln by Janis Cooke Newman. Of course, if you can't tell from the title already, it's about Mary Todd Lincoln, the wife of our 16th U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. She's probably one of the best known first ladies in history, like Jackie Kennedy, although unfortunately, unlike Jackie, she's not really famous for the right reasons. A lot of people, like to this day, they just don't understand her and they believe a lot of old, gossip and rumors about her. But she really did, as the title of that blog post indicates, she totally deserved better. Like, people just, oh, she was a nutcase, and they just don't understand, like, there's a lot more to it than that, and like all the sorrows in her life that led, like, she lost 3 of her 4 children, and she saw her husband assassinated, and she lost her mother very young. Just like so much trauma in her life, and people are like, oh, she was just a nutcase, and she liked shopping, and she was like a not a kleptomaniac, just like a spendthrift, or just someone who like was spending way too much money. And they don't look at the actual person behind all those stories. So let's just get down with it. I was quite excited to stumble across this thick historical novel about Mary Todd Lincoln. I've been deeply interested in the Lincolns since age 8, with the interest waxing and waning over time. So many books focus on President Lincoln and his youngest sons, Willie and Tad, but not too much attention has been paid to the long-suffering Mary, unfortunately. Overall, I think I would give this a 3 out of 5, and I still stand by this rating 5 or so years later. I read every word, and overall I was held by the story and Ms. Newman's writing, but there were a number of things which, unfortunately, disappointed me. Number 1. While the wraparound segments in the mental hospital were an interesting idea, I don't think they fit so well with the main text. I personally don't like being jerked back and forth between past and present. There needs to be more balance with such a structure, and unfortunately, as I've mentioned in several other previous videos and blog posts, I think that, like back and forth, like narrative structure, I mean, of course it can be done well, like more than a few times, but it has to be done for the right reasons. And I just feel like many writers these days are choosing it because, oh, it's trendy, or, oh, I've seen everyone else doing it, so I'd better do it too because that's what people expect, and it's like new and fresh and this and that, instead of, oh, does this really work for my story, or would my story work better with just like one main narrative, or maybe a couple of flashbacks as necessary or relevant, or maybe just, oh, it starts, let's see, in the past, someone's telling a story, and then it starts in the present, someone is like, for example, a grandmother or whoever is telling a story, and then it shifts back to the past, and then there might be a few like brief wraparound segments back in the present throughout, just to remind us this is, being told as a flashback. Or the other, classic example when wraparound works well, someone in the present is trying to solve a mystery from the past. But I just, felt like maybe it could have worked for this book if it were handled differently, but I just personally didn't like being jerked back and forth. There just wasn't, enough balance within that structure. And I have also found out there were no bars on the windows at the mental hospital, and no records of patients being killed by overdoses of medication like laudanum. Number 2, it was jarring to see the R word used several times, even as a medical term. That word wasn't even used in that way in the 19th century. Did Ms. Newman not think we would understand a bygone classification like feeble-minded, moron, or imbecile? Number 3, Robert Lincoln is portrayed as the antagonist, a complete villain with no human emotions or sympathy. And if you don't already know, Robert Todd Lincoln was the firstborn child of President and Mrs. Lincoln. From birth, he's depicted as cold, unfeeling, distant, antagonistic towards his mother and later wife, who was also named Mary, cruel, etc. In real life, 2 recesses had to be called at Mary's insanity hearing because Robert was crying too much to testify. He also stayed by his baby brother Tad on his deathbed and was very grieved to lose his final surviving sibling. Number 4, speaking of, the wrong age is given for Tad at one point. Like, don't ask me how obsessed I used to be with Tad and Willie Lincoln. At one point I had even started back in like 1993. I never went back to this book over all these years. I don't think I ever will, but never say never. A book about these 3 siblings, 2 girls and a boy from Vicksburg, Mississippi, and for whatever reason they were like, going up north during the Civil War. Yeah, that's a great time to move your family, particularly when you don't have any adults with you, and they were going to end up in like Washington D.C. towards the end of the war, and I guess there was going to be some kind of like early like preteen or like early teen years, and romance between Tad and the oldest girl in the story. And like I was like, reading so many books about him and like dreaming about him, and just I was just so obsessed with Tad and Willie Lincoln when I was like about age 8 to 13, and it came back really strong at 13, but that's a whole subject for another topic. Number 5. I obviously know the focus isn't supposed to be on President Lincoln, but some rather important events of his life are left out. Why wouldn't his wife mention he started growing a beard, for example? Like, for example, if that were, my like husband or boyfriend, like either real or fictional, I would mention it in the book. Oh, by the way, my husband or boyfriend, oh, he's growing a beard now, and I'm not sure how I feel about that. Or, oh, I think he looks so much more handsome with the beard. Or, oh, it's going to take a little while to get used to him because I've only ever known him as, a clean-shaven dude. Or how about President Lincoln sneaking into Washington in disguise on another train for fear of assassination during the final leg of his journey to the White House? Like, seriously, how could you not mention something like that? Number 6. Based on what came before, I honestly didn't realize at first that Ms. Newman was actually describing the Great Chicago Fire of 1871. I thought Mary was having another drug-induced hallucination or dream. Like, seriously, I was thinking, oh, she's like hallucinating again, or she was doing way too many drugs, or this is a really vivid nightmare. And then it became obvious, like, oh, this is actually really happening. Oh, this is the Great Chicago Fire. It wasn't clear at all to me. Maybe she just could have handled that a little bit better to make it obvious this was not Mary doing drugs yet again or hallucinating. Number 7. I was quite disappointed. Such short shrift was given to the Lincolns' White House life. How about some descriptions of dinners and teas with important dignitaries and generals? Mary's young friend Julia Taft, the older sister of Tad and Willie's friends Bud and Holly. Yes, their real names were Bud and Holly, or all of whom were regular visitors. And I know this is a little bit off topic. Julia Taft, there was a story I read about her in one of the many books about, Tad and Willie when I was much younger, and it kind of disturbs me a lot now that I'm older, and I think it might have disturbed me even then. Like, Julia, who's I think like 17 or so, like, late teens. I'm not off the top of my head. I don't remember her age, but she must have been like, late teens, early 20ish. And she really wanted a picture of, President Lincoln. And she had never, like kissed him and all, not in a romantic way, but just like on the cheek, or maybe just on the mouth for a few seconds. People had different standards in those days. And like President Lincoln said, oh, give me a kiss and you shall have a picture of me. And like, that's just kind of creepy. I mean, I don't think he was doing it to deliberately sexually harass her, but that just, that's kind of a disturbing story. Hopefully no one would ever, dare to try that now, or at least not, get away with it. Number 8. This is one of those books where so many pages are devoted to the subject's early life. Not much room is left to properly delve into the middle and early years. And I've seen this so many times in like biographies and memoirs and like, fictional stories like set over a very, very long time. There's this, great detail about when the subject is a child, or in the early years of fame, the early years of the marriage, teenage years, maybe a little bit, after the band like breaks up or their greatest fame, and they start, becoming less popular until a nice comeback, or, a political comeback or whatever like that. And then like the middle years, there's a little bit of detail, but it's not nearly as, rich and detailed as the early years of the subject. And then, oh, forget about for the last years too. It's like, oh, that just happened. It's not a big deal. Like, who cares? Maybe 20 pages for that. And sometimes, unfortunately, that also happens with boxed sets for a band. Like, for example, the 30 years of maximum R&B for The Who. Like, there was so much emphasis put on their, great years in the late 60s, early 70s. So by the time they got to the early 80s, it's like barely any songs at all were given to represent that period of their life. I really don't like that when people do that in either a book or a boxed set of music. Number 9, I don't want to read sex scenes with real life people. Like, why? I have zero problem reading or writing sex scenes in general about fictional characters, but I don't want to picture President Lincoln of all people getting it on. Forget the famous or heroic aspect. What person wants complete strangers 100 plus years later writing about her or his most private, intimate moments for the whole world? And I did mention I do have like wedding night scenes in both of my alternative histories, but that's because obviously that's a necessary part of the storyline, and there is absolutely nothing, like, graphic at all, like, parts or tingly feelings or anything like that, because I was respecting the real life people involved in them. It's like primarily, predominantly more about like the emotions of being with this person for the first time and the excitement of, like, consummating the marriage and having the wedding night. So it's, as sweet as possible, like absolutely nothing graphic. And I just wish people writing historical fiction, not just, alternative historical fiction about real life figures, would do this too. Like, actually, respect the subject instead of, oh, I'm going to write a hot, sultry, X-rated, like PORN type sex scene with real people, instead of like, would I want people to write this about me if I ever go down in history and people are writing a historical novel about me someday? Or would I want them to respect my privacy and just like leave everything to the imagination and just focus on the emotional aspect of the first time being with someone, if that is indeed like a valid, like relevant, like important part of an actual storyline that they intend to tell? Oh, and also, for that matter, I don't want to read about anyone, real people or fictional characters, relieving themselves either. Gross. Both of these things are trends that need to go away. Like, why would anyone ever even think of like a toilet scene with a character? I mean, maybe throwing up from morning sickness. I've done that a number of times in my own books, but anything past vomiting, why would you put that in a book? There has to be like a really, really, really like rock solid, compelling reason for me to even like think of like including that, or like thinking that belongs in a book. Just, why? One of my most hated trends like ever in recent years. Number 10. Is there any evidence Mary seduced her husband before marriage to force him into marrying her and her family into accepting the relationship? I'm well aware, obviously, premarital sex has always existed, but the way this storyline was handled seems so unrealistic and bizarre. Like, seriously, show me the evidence. Don't just, oh, this would be interesting, I'll just spice up the story by, like, shoving it in there, no pun intended. It's just like, if you're going to do something that's very unusual or people haven't heard of, or, like, no one has heard of, just maybe mention that in a footnote where you got this information, instead of just, oh, I'll just make it up because, like, no one can prove it anyway, because they wouldn't have been writing about their sex lives like Casanova back then. And speaking of, number 11, Ms. Newman depicts Mary as sex-obsessed and President Lincoln as frigid and undersexed, with this imbalance of passion deeply affecting their relationship. She even has Mary thinking about sex when her husband is on his deathbed. Like, ew, why? That's just so inappropriate. And in an earlier chapter, she depicts Mary having an affair when she's shopping in New York, and that was also kind of like gross and like, oh, I just remembering it just makes me cringe. It was just like stuck in there to be, titillating. They're like, she's having sex up against a door with someone. I don't want to get more graphic than that, but it's just like the outcome of the New York shopping trip when President Lincoln was in his early, like, first or second year, whatever, of the White House. That was, why would you even put that in there? And if memory serves, there's at least one other affair with someone in this book. It's just like so many things. I just did not understand her decisions, and particularly when no one has like known about this or attested to this. Just don't go with rumors. I'm trying to say, like, go with what the person actually did. And I do have a whole other video about why I don't like this trend of always using, it seems like for some writers anyway, always and only using real life characters in historical fiction. They just like, oh, I like this character, so I'm just gonna like go wild and make everything up, instead of, oh, maybe have a real, like, a fictional character who is many things similar to that person. Like, for example, they live in the same part of the world in the same era. They have similar but not identical life circumstances. Oh, and then you can, within reason, of course, like, make up entirely your own story for that person, instead of, oh, I like this person on the surface, but I'm not going to stay true to much history. I'm just going to like make up this, oh, this person was secretly gay, even though like that was not, no one even suspected that. And oh, and this person was having affairs with 10 different women, and this and that, and oh, this person had a scandalous like secret life, was spying for places, and so many things that just like they make things up, and I just feel that's really not respectful. Even alternative history needs to have a grounding in the basis of actual history. Yeah, depending on what changes and when, maybe you can go a little bit more like radically different than the person did in real life, but even then you still have to stay within like basic parameters of what would have been possible in that person's real life. But overall, I did enjoy a good portion of the book. I truly felt for this woman who suffered so much and lived in a time when there wasn't much recourse, but a mental hospital and medicine that made her condition worse. It's just that the execution was lacking, and I felt like a voyeur reading the sex scenes, and I just, again, I can't stress enough, like, that should not be a trend if you do, like, legitimately for the purposes of the storyline feel like you need to do a sex scene, like, for example, the wedding night scene or the first time with an important person in the character's life. Just do it respectfully, as sweet and vague and nondescript as possible, and keep it all about the emotions. Just like, I can't say enough how much I hate this trend. It's just so invasive of real people's privacy. Thank you very much for watching. Please consider leaving a comment. I love having conversations with these guys. This is my first proper video after NaNoWriMo ended. I'm really excited to get back to making videos again. I am also in process of making a new pen video, but I'm just, waiting on another box with a bunch of like cute, fun beckoning cat pen rests and some other like fun pen rests and stuff, which I got for the recent Black Friday and Cyber Monday. So if you like my pen content, I've been doing more videos of lately. Look forward to that, and please subscribe if you haven't already. And thanks again very much for watching, and I will see you soon. Bye.